help me survive this night.
The endless ice desert stretched in all directions, merging on the horizon with the heavy leaden sky. The huge balloon, once proudly bearing the name of the Swedish crown, now lay on the ice floes, resembling a fallen giant. The fierce Arctic wind tore at the remains of the silk envelope, making a dull sound like the moans of a dying creature. Salomon Andrée stood knee-deep in snow, silently gazing at the wreckage of his great dream. The cold air burned his lungs with every deep breath, forcing him to physically acknowledge the reality of the catastrophe that had occurred. The air temperature was dropping rapidly, turning the moisture on people's faces into sharp ice crystals. The air was so thick and frosty that it seemed like a tangible barrier, preventing him from taking a normal step forward. André's numb hands clutched the icy side of the dented gondola, trying to find some kind of support in this changed world. Everything was being decided here and now, amid the frozen ocean waves that had turned into insurmountable stone barriers. A long journey awaited them, and the harsh reality was that not everyone would make it to the end. He was left alone with the cold, aware of his responsibility for the lives of two young people who had trusted his authority. No one knew who would live to see dawn, because the Arctic night did not forgive even the slightest mistake. The world was too far away to count on a quick rescue operation or accidental help from a passing ship. It all began in Stockholm, in luxurious halls lit by bright lights and filled with loud toasts. Salomon Andrée stood in front of a map of the Arctic, confidently pointing to the white spot of the North Pole that had beckoned him for years. He was an engineer, a man of precise calculations who believed in the triumph of human reason over the forces of wild nature. The funding for the expedition was unprecedented, with even the King of Sweden himself contributing a significant amount to this ambitious national project. None of those present in their warm offices doubted that the huge balloon would easily fly across the icy wasteland. The team was selected with great care, including only the most dedicated to science and the most resilient young people. Niels Strindberg was a brilliant physicist and photographer who dreamed of capturing the unexplored lands for future generations of explorers. Knut Frenkel was in excellent health and had an engineering mind, which made him an indispensable assistant in difficult situations. They were full of enthusiasm and youthful courage, unaware of the terrible price they would have to pay. None of them yet understood the scale of what was happening, considering the upcoming flight to be a grand and safe scientific adventure. Preparation on the island of Danskoya took several long weeks, accompanied by constant delays due to unfavorable northern winds. A huge wooden hangar protected the inflatable balloon from Arctic storms, while technicians worked around the clock to produce precious hydrogen. Each day of delay increased the nervous tension among the crew members, who were eager to embark on their historic flight. They still called it a delay, but it was already a trap set by nature itself for ambitious explorers. Time was running out, and the short polar summer was rapidly moving toward its inevitable and cold end. The balloon slowly rose into the air, caught by the wind currents, and headed towards the endless icy ocean. However, in the first minutes of the flight, an unforeseen event occurred, which was a harbinger of the coming disaster. The heavy guide ropes, designed to control the altitude, suddenly came loose and fell into the cold water with a loud splash. Left without hydropumps, the balloon soared upward, losing precious gas through safety valves due to a sharp pressure drop. At that very moment, the perfect plan collapsed, giving way to a chaotic struggle with the unpredictable elements. After 65 hours of exhausting struggle with fog and icing, the balloon finally lost its lifting power. The gondola crashed into the pack ice with a dull thud, bounced and crashed again, dragging itself several meters along the ridges. The people tumbled out onto the snow, stunned and exhausted from sleepless nights spent in constant anticipation of the inevitable disaster. There was no way back. Their airship was dead, and ahead lay hundreds of kilometers of impassable ice. It was the end of their great illusion and the beginning of the real test they had to endure to the end. The landscape around them was striking in its harsh and lifeless grandeur, leaving no room for faint hopes. Dazzling white ice stretched to the horizon, broken only by deep cracks and high ridges of ice hummocks. The cold air, frozen to a palpable density, burned their lungs and made their eyes water with pain. The silence was so absolute that they could clearly hear their own heartbeats and the sound of blood rushing in their temples. The most frightening thing was not the pain in their bruised bodies, but this deafening, oppressive silence on all sides. They began to pack 3 sleds, distributing the load so that everyone could pull their share. The weight of a single sled reached 200 kilograms, which made them practically unliftable for people who were weakened and unaccustomed to such labor. They loaded canned food, a tent, sleeping bags, weapons, and a small boat for crossing wide swamps onto these sleds. With each passing day, hope grew fainter as they realized the true weight of their load and the impassability of the route. No one wanted to take responsibility for a possible failure, but a decision had to be made immediately. The first steps on the pack ice were a real revelation, destroying the last remnants of their optimistic mood. The snow was deep and loose, and the sleds constantly sank, getting stuck between the uneven edges of frozen salt blocks. Physical exhaustion set in slowly but inevitably, robbing their bodies of the ability to resist the piercing icy cold. Their clothes were constantly damp with sweat, which instantly turned into an icy crust in the cold, restricting their movements. The fingers and toes lost sensitivity, turning deathly pale and then frighteningly blue. Some already understood how this would end if they could not radically increase their daily speed. But time was already working against them, taking away the last reserves of strength from their exhausted and suffering bodies. Navigating the drifting ice proved to be an incredibly difficult task, as the ice itself was constantly moving under the influence of currents. Strindberg regularly made astronomical observations, and his calculations yielded increasingly discouraging results. The realization that they were trapped in the ice with no possibility of reaching land in the coming months was an emotional turning point. They changed course, heading for closer islands. But even this goal seemed like an unattainable fantasy. From that moment on, they were no longer the crew of a research vessel. They had become hunted animals looking for any way out. A long journey awaited them, and not all of them would make it to the end, leaving their footprints in the snow, which would soon be swept away by the north wind. Nature was in no hurry to kill them. It simply waited, enjoying its absolute and unconditional power over fragile human flesh. The landscape remained unchanged, as if they were stuck in a bad dream, where movement brought no visible results. Huge ice ridges blocked their path like fortress walls, forcing them to spend hours looking for detours or laboriously cutting steps through the ice. The temperature dropped lower and lower, turning the water in their flasks into solid ice, which had to be melted for a long time under their arms. Each rest stop was accompanied by agonizing shivering, as their motionless bodies rapidly lost precious heat. He did not know if he would survive the night, huddled in his frozen sleeping bag and listening anxiously to the sounds outside. The polar bear meat saved them from acute hunger, but it harbored a hidden, invisible, deadly threat. Trichinosis, a serious parasitic disease, began to slowly destroy their bodies from within, causing unbearable muscle pain and fever. At first, they attributed their discomfort to normal fatigue and the effects of prolonged exposure to extreme and relentless cold. They continued to eat the infected meat, unaware that every bite brought them closer to their inevitable and painful end. No one wanted to say it out loud, but the health of all 3 was rapidly deteriorating with each day they spent on the ice. Andrée often wandered away from the camp to be alone and try to gather his scattered thoughts. At that moment, he did not yet understand that he was alone in his inner resistance to the impending icy chaos. He was not afraid of death. He was afraid of not being found, afraid that their story would disappear without a trace in the ice forever. He began to speak aloud, simply to hear a human voice and not go mad from the surrounding, deafening emptiness. The surroundings were unbearably empty, and the horizon was blank, confirming his darkest and most frightening inner fears. Every morning began with a difficult rise and the painful process of putting on frozen, completely inflexible clothing. Their movements were automatic, devoid of any meaning, as if their bodies were controlled by external, alien, and ruthless forces. Nature did not try to kill them deliberately. It simply did not try to save them, remaining completely indifferent to their suffering. Everything was decided here and now, with every hoarse breath, with every step on the slippery and deadly ice. They moved forward simply because stopping meant surrendering to the white silence, patiently waiting for its prey. September brought with it the first truly fierce Arctic blizzards, which finally buried their hopes for a land crossing. The wind reached hurricane force, knocking people off their feet and forcing them to sit for days in a fragile silk tent. Snow penetrated everywhere, getting into the folds of their clothes, food, and sleeping bags, turning them into wet, icy lumps. The cold united them during the day and separated them at night, when everyone shivered in their corner, fighting against the encroaching nothingness. They no longer counted the days, they counted the chances, which with each new blizzard rapidly approached zero. The decision to stop moving eastward was extremely difficult for them, but it was the only correct one in the situation. They were too exhausted to continue pulling heavy sleds through the insurmountable obstacles of the churning pack ice. Andrée decided to organize winter quarters right on the drifting ice floe, timidly hoping that the current would carry them to inhabited lands. This was the moment after which everything changed, as they voluntarily gave up the active physical struggle for their salvation. Now their fate was solely in the hands of ocean currents and the whims of unpredictable, harsh Arctic weather. The silence around their snowy home was broken only by the howling wind and the distant rumble of thick ocean ice breaking. The most frightening thing was not the pain in their exhausted bodies, but this silence, which emphasized their absolute, universal isolation. They were on a moving white platform in the middle of the Black Ocean, forever cut off from the rest of humanity. The horizon was empty, and he knew it as he peered into the pitch darkness of the approaching polar night through the narrow entrance. No one had prepared him for loneliness on such a colossal scale, where man is but a grain of sand in the enormous millstones of the elements. The hut was completely destroyed. Their shelter no longer existed, leaving them once again defenseless in the face of the roaring Arctic storm. They stood on the wreckage of the ice floe, soaked to the skin, frozen and completely exhausted, realizing that it was no longer possible to spend the winter here. It was at that moment that they finally ceased to be mere survivors and became doomed, awaiting their terrible fate. There was no way back, and ahead of them lay only the deafening darkness and uncertainty of the drifting ice chaos. A long journey awaited them, and the harsh reality was that their physical strength was finally and irrevocably exhausted. In the morning, when the blizzard had subsided a little, they suddenly saw the dark outlines of land on the horizon, hidden behind a veil of fog. It was Kvitoya Island, or White Island, a rocky piece of uninhabited land almost completely covered by a huge ice sheet. The land beckoned them like a lifeline, promising solid, firm footing instead of the treacherous, shifting ocean ice. They threw all their remaining strength into crossing the ice ridges and wide open water to reach this unwelcoming shore. They still hoped that someone was looking for them and that their chances of being found by rescuers would increase significantly on solid ground. Landing on the island's cold pebble beach, they collapsed to the ground, unable even to rejoice at their rescue from the ice. The White Island turned out to be an extremely inhospitable place, windswept, without a single tree or bush for shelter. They somehow set up camp at the foot of a small cliff, trying to protect themselves from the piercing icy wind that cut painfully into their skin. From that moment on, time became their main enemy, as illness and exhaustion took their toll at an alarming rate. Nature made no distinctions. It simply continued its cold, methodical assault on their utterly weakened bodies. Strindberg was fading much faster than the others. His body, exhausted by illness and unbearable physical exertion, refused to fight any longer. He lay in the tent, delirious and often losing consciousness, while Andrée and Frankel tried to warm him up somehow. They gave him warm water, but it brought no relief, as his internal organs had already begun to fail. At first, no one wanted to say it out loud, but death was already invisibly standing at the threshold of their miserable, drafty tent. He did not know if he would survive the night, his breathing becoming increasingly irregular, quiet, and shallow. Strindberg's death was the turning point when hope finally left their freezing camp on the rocky white island. The team had been falling apart for a long time, but now only two completely broken and doomed people remained. They looked at each other and saw a primal fear mixed with resigned acceptance of their inevitable fate in this icy hell. The question was not whether everyone would survive, but which of them would be the last to leave this eternal frost. On that day, the countdown to their last hours began, devoid of any meaning or will to continue physical resistance. The tent soon collapsed under the weight of the falling snow, hiding the bodies of the last participants of the great expedition under a thick white shroud. The world continued to live. Newspapers wrote bold guesses about their fate. Rescue expeditions plowed the oceans, but here time stopped forever. A long journey awaited them, and they went through it to the end, paying the highest price for their boundless human ambitions. Everything changed in a second when the ice finally prevailed, proving its undeniable superiority over fragile flesh and technology. The Arctic did not kill them quickly. It simply waited, and its long wait was crowned with complete and unconditional success. The winter of 1897 had fully come into its own, covering the island of Kvitoya with a thick layer of impenetrable ice. Fierce storms raged over the dead camp, tearing the remains of the tent to shreds and scattering light objects all over the beach. Snow penetrated every crack, filling the space around the motionless bodies and gradually turning them into monolithic ice sculptures. Nature made no distinction between cold stones and people, mercilessly erasing any traces of human presence from the face of the earth. It was a moment that changed everything for them, forever transferring them from the world of the living to eternal icy silence. The years pass, slowly replacing each other in the endless Arctic cycle of bright polar days and deep, dark polar nights. In distant Europe, wars began and ended, empires collapsed, and technological progress lifted airplanes and huge airships into the sky. But on the harsh white island, nothing changed. Only the layer of ice above the camp became thicker or thinner depending on the summer. None of them yet understood the scale of what was happening when they died, but their deaths became a symbol of the era of great discoveries. Time here was measured not in hours, but in long decades of absolute silence and frozen, motionless, icy calm. The families of those who died in Sweden lived for many years in hope, refusing to believe the worst and waiting for a miracle that never happened. Strindberg's fiancée, Anna, waited faithfully for him for several years before coming to terms with her loss and trying to start a new life. Frankel's mother gazed out at the sea until the end of her days, desperately hoping to see a rescue ship with her son on the horizon. They were separated not only by an icy desert, but also by cruel uncertainty, which prevented them from putting a logical end to this tragic story. At first, it seemed like a delay, but over the years, hope turned into a dull, nagging pain that never completely went away. The Arctic guarded its secret with incredible tenacity, reliably protecting Kvitoya Island with a dense ring of impenetrable pack ice. Even in the warmest summer months, it was almost impossible to approach the shore due to the danger of being crushed by heavy ice fields. Kvitoya Island continued to keep its icy silence. Buffeted by cold winds and washed by the black waters of the Arctic Ocean, the shadows of Andrée, Strindberg, and Frankel were invisibly present among the rocks, as if silently waiting for the hour when they would be retrieved. They did not know if they would survive the night, but they had survived decades, preserving their faces and their words in the ice. From that moment on, the expedition was over, but their long journey home was just beginning in the rays of the snow melting in the sun. Nature was in no hurry to kill them. It was simply waiting, and now it was ready to give its prey back to the people. In August 1930, 33 years after the balloon's launch, the climate presented a surprise. An abnormally warm summer caused the Arctic glaciers to retreat, exposing areas of land that had been securely hidden under permafrost for decades. A Norwegian whaling ship called the Bratvåg, engaged in scientific research and fishing, accidentally approached the shores of White Island. The sailors landed on a pebble beach to replenish their fresh water supplies from small streams flowing from the rapidly melting glacier. None of them yet understood the scale of what was happening when the sailors stumbled upon a strange, dark object sticking out from under the snow. The ship's captain immediately ordered that all artifacts and remains found be carefully removed, realizing the enormous historical value of this discovery. Soon they discovered the frozen body of Salomon Andrée himself, leaning against a rock, his face hidden under layers of ice and clothing. Nearby, they found the remains of Frenkel, and in a crevice in the rock, the improvised grave of Niels Strindberg, carefully laid with large stones by his companions. The story of their survival became a global sensation, overshadowing many other important events of the time with its incredible cinematic drama. Everything was decided here and now, in the pages of newspapers, where Andrée and his companions came back to life in the minds of millions of readers. They still hoped to wait out the storm in their notes, but the storm engulfed them, making them immortal heroes of their nation. The discovery on White Island closed one of the darkest, most mysterious, and intriguing chapters in the history of the North Pole. It proved that enthusiasm and technical progress are absolutely powerless in the face of the primeval power of nature if they are not backed up by experience. A long journey lay ahead of them, and the harsh reality was that this journey would end not in resounding triumph, but in quiet tragedy. Nature did not try to kill them deliberately. It simply did not try to save them, strictly obeying its eternal, unchanging laws. The story of the expedition became a cruel but important lesson for all who believed that the Arctic could be easily conquered on the spur of the moment. Today, the expedition's belongings are kept in a museum, neatly arranged under clear glass, far from the piercing Arctic cold. Rusty weapons, torn sleeping bags, and diaries with faded ink attract thousands of visitors who want to touch history. Looking at these items, it is easy to imagine the calloused, frost-bitten hands that clutch them in the last hours of their lives. These silent witnesses to tragedy speak more eloquently than any loud words about the incredible price that was paid for human curiosity. It was a moment that changed everything, not only for them, but for the entire approach to polar exploration. Kvitoya Island remains as harsh, cold, and unwelcoming as it was in 1897. There is a monument there, hidden under deep snow for most of the year and buffeted by fierce icy storms. The rare tourists and explorers who make it to this remote corner of the planet feel the same oppressive silence of white silence. The surroundings are still unbearably empty, and the horizon is blank, a constant reminder of the incredible fragility of human life in the face of eternity. No one prepared him for loneliness, and the island continues to preserve that loneliness, reflecting the sunlight with its giant glaciers. At that moment, he did not yet understand that he was left alone with his guilt, but gradually the realization of this completely destroyed him. He was not afraid of death. He was afraid of not being found, afraid that his grandiose project would go down in history as a foolish adventure. Nature was in no hurry to kill him. It gave him enough time to fully realize the catastrophic consequences of his mistakes and overconfidence. This expedition became an important watershed in the history of polar exploration, forcing future travelers to take survival issues more seriously. Technology continued to develop steadily, but now it was necessarily complemented by thorough preparation for possible accidents and in-depth study of the experience of local northern peoples. The tragedy on Kvitoya was a cruel but absolutely necessary lesson, paid for with 3 lives for the safety of future generations of brave explorers. They still called it a setback, but it marked the beginning of a new era, where respect for the elements became immeasurably more important than human ambition. The team began to fall apart, but their legacy united other explorers in their quest to discover the North without unnecessary sacrifices. The Arctic ice continues to keep its secrets safe, grinding up icebergs and hiding the traces of many other nameless and forgotten expeditions. The story of Salomon Andrée is just one of many dramas that have played out on this vast, endless, and cold white stage. We remember them not for what they achieved, but for how they fought when faced with a hopeless situation. A long journey awaited them, and the harsh reality was that this journey became an eternal symbol of the human will to live. The Arctic did not kill them quickly. It simply waited, and its frightening silence still echoes in the cold winds. The story of the hot air balloon expedition has come to an end, but its echoes continue to resound in every gust of the icy north wind. When we look at the serene white landscapes of the polar latitudes, we must always remember the blood that lies hidden beneath the snow. This story is not about heroism as we understand it, but about primitive, animalistic survival against all conceivable laws of logic. It is a grim tale of people who confidently stepped beyond the limits of what was possible and found themselves trapped with no way out. On that day, the countdown to their eternity began as their emaciated bodies merged with the glacier, becoming forever part of the harsh polar landscape. Andrée's expedition shows us the dark side of adventure, where there are no winners, only those who have lost an unequal battle with the elements. Everything was decided here and now, with every breath of frosty air that inexorably brought them closer to the inevitable end of their earthly journey. They still hoped to wait out the storm, but the storm turned out to be longer than their lives, becoming their last and eternal cold refuge. Salomon Andrée, Niels Strindberg, and Knut Frankel did not conquer the North Pole, but they accomplished something much more important for humanity. They clearly demonstrated the limits of human endurance and showed how it is possible to maintain dignity in conditions incompatible with normal existence. Their defeat became a great victory of the human spirit over animal fear, even when their bodies finally refused to obey their fading minds. They still acted as a crew, supporting each other until their last breath, until the Arctic cold took them forever. The team began to fall apart at the seams, but they remained loyal to each other, honestly sharing one fate among three in the icy desert. Today, the Arctic is changing rapidly, with the eternal ice melting faster than ever, opening up new horizons and new dangers for modern man. But the ancient spirit of the North remains the same, cold, indifferent, and demanding absolute, unquestioning respect for its ancient, unshakable laws of ice. Those who go there today carry with them the memory of those who remained in the ice forever, like Andrée and his companions. It was a moment that changed everything, but the lessons of the past remain relevant for each new generation of brave polar explorers. A long journey awaited them, and the harsh reality is that this journey will never be completely safe and easy. As we conclude this story, we respectfully leave them where they found their peace, among the white snows and cold winds. The balloon has long since rotted away, the sled has crumbled to dust, but their rescued diaries continue to speak to us through the thick veil of time. This is a difficult story about people who wanted so badly to reach the heavens, but fell to the harshest and coldest land in the world. The Arctic did not kill them quickly, it simply waited.